Welcome back to Public Speaking for Lawyers. This is program 6 about how to practice. By the end of this program, you'll understand how you can incorporate practice into your professional conversations every day.
You will also learn how to eliminate those annoying thinking noises such as like, by thinking in silence instead.
And you'll exploit muscle memory to help you remember what you will say. How do you find time to practice in a busy life with so many obligations? We have a few ideas about how you can incorporate practice into your everyday life at work and at home. Here's our first advice. Practice alone, practice aloud, and practice a lot. What do I mean practice alone? When you have a public speaking assignment or an important conversation coming up, go in your office, close the door, and start talking. Practice alone at first, because that gives you the safety and privacy to make mistakes, to try out some stuff that might feel over the top. You might have had an idea that sounded good, but once you started talking about it alone, you heard that it wasn't so good. So the first way to start practicing is by yourself. If you have colleagues who will be happy to listen to you, do that later. At the very beginning of how you're going to practice, do it by yourself so you can make mistakes. Once you start talking, you can take notes about what you really love, but you're going to start talking right away. So don't go lock yourself in your office and then start writing out what you want to say or typing up the whole thing. You want to start talking right away. So when you close that door and you start practicing alone, stand up, jot down a few notes, put your timer on your smartphone, and talk for 10 minutes. See what it feels like. But it's got to be out loud. And again, let us caution you. So many lawyers tell us that they prepared. They were so busy preparing, and they were working on a PowerPoint presentation or writing it out. The way to prepare to speak in public is to start talking, and there is no substitute for it. So go through the whole routine. Stand the way you're going to stand, find your stance, center your hips, take a breath, come to the ready position, and start talking out loud. This is rough drafting. Just like you would writing, you wouldn't say, this is the first, I'm going to make this version and turn that in to the senior partner or give that to the court. You are going to write something or say something that is going to change, just as you write something that's going to change. So think of it as rough drafting. It's just out loud rough drafting. You might stand up once and it's apples. The next time it's oranges. But both of those versions will have ideas that get you closer to your ultimate goal of coming up with the presentation that you want to have. Yes, you'll take notes after you speak for 10 minutes, and then you'll know where you want to go. But the important part is for you to be able to hear what you say. Does it sound right? Is it in my own voice? Is that the way I talk every day? If you write something, that's in a different style. It's the style of your writing. You're trying to hone the sound of your voice, and by saying it out loud, you start to develop the muscle memory you need to say those ideas over and over again. So it's going to be alone at first, then aloud, and then a lot. What do we mean by that? Who's got time to do anything a lot? It doesn't take very many minutes to get something accomplished. When you're driving to work or walking your dog, when you're doing something when you're by yourself, start talking out loud. If you're in your office, close the door and practice for 5 minutes. 5 minutes will get you farther than 0 minutes. So when we say a lot, we say try to work it into your everyday life. If you're talking about these ideas with your colleagues, start to try out ideas on them as well, so that you've advanced from being alone completely, but you're not on your feet giving a presentation, messing with your PowerPoint presentation. You're just talking about the ideas. You can do that a lot, driving, walking your dog, or talking to colleagues down the hall. So practice alone, aloud, and as much as you can.
It's too late once you are beginning your speech as the public speaker to ask yourself these questions. Do I say too much? Or do I talk too fast? The only way to get to those problems is to think of them as things you will practice, not just in a formal practice session in a room alone, talking aloud as Marcia discussed, but rather to begin to incorporate the fix to those problems into your everyday conversation. And in our work with attorneys, I would say that the two most common problems that we face, regardless of the attorney, regardless of the practice area, regardless, frankly, of the experience, from the junior lawyer up to the senior partner, the two things we face most often are people who unconsciously use the thinking noise a lot. Very often when I'm working with someone and using video as a teaching tool, I will say, now, the one thing I really want to focus on when we watch this video is how much you're saying And the response often is, do I say Well, I hate when people say And I often say, well, you're not going to like this video, because it's not uncommon, even for experienced attorneys, unconsciously, of course, to say not just 5 or 10, but 15 or even 20 per minute. So first I want to talk about the problem and why it's so important to eliminate it, and then a very concrete way to get that problem to go away. Then I want to talk about controlling your pace, because the fast-talking lawyer is a stereotype that everyone needs to grapple with and get control of the pace. And the solution to each of these issues, saying too much and talking too fast, boils down to the ability to think in silence. But let's explore the thinking noise because it is the most common problem. Think about the challenge for the listener. We talked earlier about echo memory, that as you're talking, what they're doing is echoing back what you said. The problem with the is that it happens where? It happens at the very moment when your listener, ideally, is processing what you just said. So literally, you are stepping on the most important part of the communication interchange, and that is they're processing what you said. It's like static on a cell phone where the connection is bad and is an annoyance. Consider the fact that it's always the same pitch. It never varies. It's always the same length of time. No one ever says and lingers on it, because that would be singing. So it's annoying. It interferes with the listener. It's repetitive, it's monotonous. You want to get rid of it. And you can't be thinking about that while you're trying to structure and remember what you want to say as the public speaker. You need to practice getting rid of it. And you need to practice it in two ways. Number one is alone. And here's my suggestion. I suspect that many of the people listening to this video are people who drive to work. So here's a way to make practice really concrete. Look at the time on the clock in your car and say, okay, for the next 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, I am going to speak out loud about what I've been working on at the office today or what I need to do for tomorrow. The content is up to you. But your only goal, ooh, I heard it. And of course, the only reason people say too much is they don't hear it. No one wakes up in the morning and says, today I think I'll say about 1,582 ums. It just happens. So the most important step in this whole process, ooh, I heard it. Because once you hear it and are, of course, bothered by it, you can begin to edit it out. So do it in that private moment in the car for 10 minutes to say, I'm going to talk for 10 minutes. I'm just going to free associate. I'm not worried about is this brilliant content. I'm just going to hear myself make the noise, and then I'm going to replace that 1 second noise with 1 second of silence. It's just a habit. And habits can be changed. Habits can be replaced with new habits. The old habit is, I think, therefore I And we're going to change that habit and make it, I think, Therefore, I have a second of silence. And you need to practice that, first of all, by yourself. Driving is a wonderful opportunity. Then you want to take that awareness into conversation, but maybe with a friend or a family member where there's no performance pressure on you, and you think no one's paying attention to whether, I heard it. I'm doing that now. So you begin to say, I've done it alone, I've become aware of it. Now I'm doing it in conversation. And very quickly, once you turn on that editor in your head, that editor starts to get rid of those distracting ums. And it's amazing how quickly smart lawyers, if you're smart enough to go to law school, get through law school, pass the bar, and get a job, you're smart enough to get rid of that problem. And believe me, once you do, you will be in one of the smallest demographics in the whole profession. That person who is that well-spoken as a lawyer. So we're going to get rid of that by thinking in silence. We're going to substitute 1 second of for 1 second of, and therefore that process of substituting that 1 second of silence is the fix. Now on to talking too fast. It's a habit to talk too fast. I think it's both the blessing and the curse of being smart, having a smart brain that moves very quickly, and therefore you talk very fast. I've almost never in my entire career had anyone say to me, I talk too slow, help me speed up. It's always the reverse. So I would define the issue of talking too fast this way. I'd make it kind of analogous to driving a car. We have, as a habit, a kind of conversational cruise control, where we talk at a certain speed in conversation because, frankly, much of what we say in conversation isn't very complicated. Certainly isn't complicated like issues in the law. So it's analogous to being a driver who sets the cruise control on 65 miles an hour. And of course, just like driving on the freeway with not a whole lot of traffic, going 65 is fine. That's appropriate. So we're not saying don't ever do that, but we're saying in the same way you drive at different speeds, you don't just go 65. We've got to find a way to moderate and pick the appropriate pace at which you're going to speak. So you don't drive in the center city at 65. You don't go through a school zone where there are signs saying school zone 15 miles an hour and say, well, sorry, I just drive 65. You would crash and burn. So in the same way you pick the speed at which you drive, you need to pick the speed at which you talk. And of course you already do. I think here's a good example of how in everyday conversation we slow way down to teach someone something, what I would make as an analogy to kind of the school zone. Think about how we give people instructions. If I were just to give you instructions to get from where I'm standing right now to my car in the parking lot, I wouldn't bolt through it quickly at 65 miles an hour. I'd say, oh, if I really want you to get to my car, I've got to say it this slowly, with lots of silence around it so you could think about it. Okay, when you leave this room, I want you to go out and turn right, and you're going to get to the elevators and get on the elevator and go to the first floor. When you come out of the elevator, and notice how, of course, I would feed you that information in chunks. That's how you would talk to me. And you wouldn't say, oh, I'm sorry, I can only talk fast. I can't give you instructions slowly. Of course you can't. You need to pick the tempo. And that has a lot to do, again, with silence. And you need to practice that. So just like practicing to get rid of while you're driving, you need to practice using that silence by yourself, in the car alone, as Marcia suggested, while you're walking the dog, while you're standing at the sink doing dishes. You need to practice making the new habit. That's sure you can talk 65 a whole lot of the time because there are times when going 65 is okay, but when you are explaining to me, as that listener in your audience, that complex legal issue, you can't go 65. You're in the school zone. You got to go 15 or 20 miles an hour, analogous to a much more moderate pace. But mind you, of course, we're not talking slow. How weird would that be? I was told to talk slow, and we don't mean that. That's why fast and slow are such nebulous notions, not particularly helpful. You're going to speak in phrases. You're going to practice doing that in your car, in conversation, and eventually you're standing in front of that audience and you're giving yourself that instruction. I'm going to speak in phrases and think in silence. But the real confidence comes from saying, and I've been practicing this in my car, driving to work. I've been practicing this in conversation. I know that not only do I no longer say, I don't talk too fast. And I can make the choice to find a more appropriate speed at which to communicate. And once you are able to do that, while you're on your feet thinking, you will be able to speak well.
Brian just talked about getting rid of as a habit and about talking too fast. There's one more thing you can practice that will make your speaking style much better if you experience this issue. Earlier, we referred to the uptick or the uptalk, that music that tends to go upward. It's ubiquitous in our culture right now. It's a habit that we pick up from other people because we are building a relationship with our friends. So if we hear our friends going in an uptalk, are you going to go downtown and go to that movie? What about it? How about that cool restaurant? We tend to talk with each other nowadays using the uptalk as a kind of habit. It's the same as saying like, or you know, or sort of, or kind of. These linguistic habits can creep into professional speech and undermine our professionalism. If you feel that you may be prey to the habit of uptalk, let's talk about how we can get rid of it. You can use silence, but you'll first have to hear the inflection as it happens. And the reason it's a little tricky is uptalk is the same habit as making a list. When I stand to speak, I have a list of the first things I'm going to say. I'll say my name. I'll say what time of day it is. It's a pleasure to be there, and that I'm going to talk about a certain topic. So I might stand up to say, good morning, my name is Marcia Hunter. It's a pleasure to be here with you again today. I'm going to address the issue of signing contracts that have hazardous ebook clauses in them. I haven't actually walked down the steps for many phrases and several sentences. It all started because I was making a list of the things I had to say before I got to my main point. So it sounded like a whole bunch of uptalk. My brain may have been saying, we've got a list here, but it sounds like uptalk. Uptalk is a habit not just because of listing, but it's a habit also because that's the way we talk now. There is some research that shows some people use uptalk as a way to mitigate their own power. That research is for another day. But right now, let's talk about how we can eliminate the uptalk. First, you have to hear the inflection. It's that huh. Then you have to walk down the steps. That's the fix for uptalk. Good morning. My name is Marcia Hunter. Walk down the steps. It's always a pleasure to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about those hazardous contracts that can lead your authors to signing a bad deal. I slow down towards the end and deliberately go down. To eliminate uptalk, you're looking to hear the music of the uptalk and then cure it by walking down the steps. There's no better place to set yourself up right than at the very beginning of your presentation. Do it on your own name. Say it right now. My name is Marcia Hunter. Walk down the steps. Say your name by walking down the steps. Use that technique to cure yourself of inflections that may undermine your confidence and authority. You want to sound confident even when you may not feel completely confident. Let's talk about using muscle memory to remember what it is you're going to say. In addition to practicing alone, aloud, and a lot, when you practice a longer presentation, practice the beginning and practice the ending. If you practice beginnings and endings, you can work your way to the middle from the ends. You'll always start strong and end strong, and the middle does tend to take care of itself a little better than beginnings or endings. Advice from some public speaking coaches is start strong and end strong. I couldn't agree more, but you can't start strong unless you know what it is you're going to say, what the topic is, the few trigger points that you're going to talk about, And the ending should also be something you've practiced. You may come up with a theme that's really comfortable for you, but it's got to trip off the tongue easily. It's got to have muscle memory for that very beginning moment when your adrenaline rush is highest. Likewise, you may arrive at a presentation and find out you had less time than you thought you were going to have. You may have to skip to the ending. If you've got it in your muscle memory, you'll be better at the end. And after all, people remember beginnings and endings. Their mind tends to wander in the middle. I'm not saying don't practice the middle, but practice beginnings and endings more than the middle, and then practice that later. Know where you're starting and where you're coming from. Maybe the exact words. You may memorize it exactly. And lastly, in this day and age, learn to watch yourself on video. I don't like it, you don't like it, nobody likes watching themselves on video. It's a fact of life, and it's the best tool ever. You can see the tics that you have, you can see odd stuff that may not matter to everyone else. Make video with your smartphone, with your notebook, with your computer. Make some video and watch yourself practice. If you've got video of your actual presentation, watch that too. It's not easy, and it's real hard to make time to watch yourself on video because we're so self-conscious about it. But if you can get over that first, I can't stand the way my hair looks, it becomes objective, and it's your best objective friend. It shows you what you'd like to improve. It lets you hear the inflection of your voice, hear you say It shows you the good stuff. Your style, after all, is what you're after. And the good stuff that you're already doing is something you want to identify. So practice alone, aloud, a lot, beginnings and endings, and you will definitely speak well as you think on your feet. To get the most out of your practice, talk to yourself and say these things.
5 minutes of practice will make me look and feel more confident. Say that.
In this conversation with my colleagues, I'm going to eliminate when I speak. Say that.
Say this. During this phone call, I will speak in phrases and walk down the steps. Say that and do that.
Since I practiced the ending, I can jump to it if I run out of time. Say that.
Practice does not make perfect, it makes better, and it makes you more confident. So if you want to stand in front of that group and speak with real confidence, there's only one solution: practice.